Kenneth Chesebro or Chesebro, the attorney, the nerdy attorney who was once a respected liberal attorney, but who has turned hard right conservative. Ken Chesebro wants a speedy trial. So what does that mean in the Fani Willis case? So he is charged in the Fani Willis case. He's also an unindicted co-conspirator in Jack Smith, the special counsel's January 6th case against Donald Trump. But Ken Chesebro was a little-known attorney who we didn't really think there was a lot of evidence against him in the January 6th case. He was holding himself out to be someone who was a lawyer giving advice to candidate Trump. However, we have recently learned about a very significant memo that he wrote on December 6th that absolutely shows he is one of the architects of the fake elector scheme, the pressure campaign against Pence, and the entire criminal conspiracy and criminal scheme to steal the election from Joe Biden. It all comes down to Ken Chesebro and his gymnastics, his mental gymnastics of twisting the law in ways that you absolutely have to, it's like a contortionist. It's not even in the realm of what's actually the law, but he uses his brain for bad and makes it so, and takes things out of context and interprets the laws in ways that is actually quite dangerous, wrong, and illegal. So Ken Chesebro has asked for a speedy trial in his case against in the case against him, the 19-defendant case brought by Fani Willis in Georgia. Now, Georgia, every state and the federal government has speedy trial laws. It's to protect both the public as well as the defendant. You know, you don't want to have charges hanging over your head forever. You have a right to have your case resolved one way or another. In New York, a felony is a 6-month speedy trial with certain periods of time that don't count towards that 6 months. Like if a defendant makes motion, seeks to have motion practice or makes motions or wants to have hearings, if it makes sense if the defendant's asking for things to happen, then that time doesn't get charged to the government, it gets charged to the defendant. And so there are periods of time that are excluded from that. But in Georgia, they have a just lightning fast speedy trial demand that, frankly, I've never seen anything like it. And you have to start a trial either in the grand jury term with which your case was brought or the next term. And so in this particular case, given the dates of when the indictment came down in Georgia, his case, if he demands, any of the 19 defendants, if they demand a speedy trial, it has to be done in November of 2023. Yes, you heard that right, November of 2023. That is very, very fast. So now it makes sense to many of us why Fani Willis, back in March when she said indictments and decisions were imminent, why it took her so long, frustrating for many of us, but why it took her so long to actually bring an indictment. It's because she knows and knew that any one of the defendants could ask for this speedy trial. And if that's the case, she has to be ready. Not like ready one day, not like I still have work to do, but like actually every single thing is done. Every piece of evidence has been gathered. Every piece of discovery has been copied to turn over to the defense. Every exhibit that you intend to introduce at trial is identified. Every witness is prepped. I mean, a lot goes into preparing a case for trial, especially one as voluminous as the case that she brought, the 98-page indictment that has over 161 acts in the 40-plus charges against 19 defendants. So it's a big case, and it just more than anything, it's not super complex other than just logistically. It's sort of a logistical balancing act with all of the various people and evidence and documents that she has to prepare. So she wanted to be ready, and Ken Chesebro, it's kind of a declaration of war. It's not really done. It's a defendant makes a strategic decision to say, you know what, I don't think you can do this. I don't think you're going to be ready. So I'm going to say I want my speedy trial. And you know what Fani Willis said? She said, you know what, I see you, and he asked for November, right? That's what he said. He goes, I want my trial in November. And you know what Fani Willis said? She said, I see your November 2023 trial date, and I will, show you October 23rd, 2023, right? She called his bluff big time. And so that's happening. His trial is going October 23rd. Now, the judge in the case, McAfee, who's been on the bench, I think a couple of months, he's very inexperienced for a case like this. So we'll see how it goes. But he said, be prepared. This case is going October 23rd. But he also said this timeline only applies to Ken Chesebro, not to the other defendants. So what that's signaling is that he's going to sever Ken Chesebro from the other defendants, and possibly anyone else who wants a speedy trial will also go with Ken Chesebro at that time.
And now let's take a quick break to talk about our next partner, Lomi. Now, I've never been able to compost before. It was always too complicated, too much work, and frankly, I don't think I even knew exactly if I was doing it right. Then I got a Lomi. Lomi allows me to turn my food scraps into dirt with just the push of a button. Lomi is a countertop electric composter that turns scraps to dirt in under 4 hours. There's no smell when it runs, and it's really quiet. Thanks to Lomi, I have way less garbage each week. My family, we're down from 3 bags per week to just 1. And here's something pretty cool. My wife, she recently started gardening, and we've been able to use the dirt that Lomi produces to help fill the garden. And since I got my Lomi, I throw out way less garbage. That means it's not going to landfills and producing methane. Instead, I turn my waste into nutrient-rich dirt that I can feed to my plants. I feel so great knowing that I'm composting and creating soil instead of waste. And I have basically a limitless supply of dirt for my garden. The other week I had my in-laws over for dinner, and the food cleanup process was such a breeze. Plus, they all think I'm super eco-conscious now. If you want to start making a positive environmental impact or just make cleanup after dinner that much easier, Lomi is perfect for you. Head to lomi.com/legalaf and use the promo code legalaf to get $50 off your Lomi. That's $50 off when you head to lomi.com/legalaf and use promo code legalaf at checkout. Food waste is gross. Let Lomi save you a cold trip out to the garbage can. And now back to the video.
So, Trump then immediately filed a notice, by the way, saying, well, I don't want a speedy trial, and I move to sever, because that's what he wants. He wants his trial to happen never, right? His whole trial strategy is delay and never, ever have a trial. So I think Ken Chesebro's strategy backfired a little bit. I don't think he thought that she would be ready. So my prediction is he's either going to fire his lawyer and then walk it back and say, oh, that was my lawyer, not me. Or this will pressure him to flip and cooperate against Trump. I think one of those two things will happen. If it does not happen and we go to trial October 23rd, that's risky, right? That's a little bit risky because, all of the other defense lawyers, all 18 defendants, they're going to watch that trial closely. So will the rest of us, because it'll be televised. So we will all watch the trial, and the lawyers will they will see what worked, what didn't work. They will develop their strategy based on the trial. It might put pressure on, if it goes well and he gets convicted, I think many others will rush to cooperate and try to make a deal so that they don't have that same fate. So I do think, though, sometimes it can be tricky because witnesses will testify. People will know their identities. And, we've seen already that individuals have death threats, et cetera. Anyone who goes against, Mr. Trump, with his threats, et cetera, his followers heed his call. They know what he's asking for when he says things like, stand back or stand down or whatever it is he said, or when he puts a a baseball bat picture next to Alvin Bragg's head, or when he says, he tweets right when he gets out of federal court, if you come after me, I'm coming after you, and puts up pictures of all the prosecutors and the Attorney General of the state of New York, Letitia James, and Joe Biden, all in a picture right after that in that context. I mean, right before he came to Georgia, he tweets about, how the murder rate and Fani Willis and, it basically threatening the community. I mean, this is a dangerous, dangerous man. And so anybody who testifies at trial against him or anybody else is brave, and we need to revere them and support them and really give them what they deserve, which is a lot of credit for having the strength to go against the bully in chief, because that is what Donald Trump is. He's a bully who doesn't like to play by the rules. And the very best witnesses at the trial, at any of these trials, whether it's Ken Chesebro, Donald Trump, or anybody else, will be Shaye Moss and Ruby Friedman. Because in some ways, this case is a bunch of politicians. It's a bunch of, it's a bunch of documents. It's a bunch of cold evidence, right? It's sort of arcane. We're going to talk about the Electoral College and the electoral, and all of those types of things that can get a little boring actually during a trial. But when Shaye Moss and Ruby Friedman, the election workers in Georgia, who Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump, and who they were accused of, basically they said these horrible, vicious things, accusing them of counting suitcases full of ballots that weren't real ballots, of passing heroin, a USB drive around, passing heroin, and USB drive with information on it that was unlawful, really said some terrible things about them, when it turns out really what they were passing to one another is a mint. And they testified about how this ruined their life, about how they got death threats, they had to move their home, how they got sick over this. That's going to be very, very powerful evidence at the trial. And it's going to be very hard for any juror to look at that and say, you know what? Yeah, sure. He was just challenging the results of the election. No, he wasn't just challenging the results of the election. Sure, he and others had a right to challenge the results. You do that in court, which he did, and lost every single one. There was no evidence of dead voters or, which they claimed, or double counting, triple counting, quadruple counting voters, or illegal voters, felon voters, all these claims that they made that Fani Willis will prove were lies. That's all going to be proven, that it was lies, and that they were criminally trying to steal an election from Joe Biden and from ultimately the American people who cast their vote for Joe Biden. So this is happening. It's happening in October. It'll be televised. So mark your calendar, because this is going to be the thing to watch. Thanks for joining. I'm Karen Friedman Agnifilo with Legal AF. Join me every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Legal AF also airs with my co-hosts Michael Popak and Ben Meiselas on Saturdays at 8 p.m. And we try to do as many hot takes as we possibly can during the week to keep people informed and to try and ultimately save our democracy. So thank you so much for listening.
Hey, Meidas Mighty. Love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram at MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.